Council. Tonight is Monday, April 7th, 2008. This evening we will be having first, prior to our public hearing, a swearing in of our newest member of council, Christine Nisley. Welcome. Law Director Lang.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to note very briefly how honored I am to be here to swear in our newest member of council, Chris Nisley. Unlike most of us that are in public office, Chris did not seek out this position through the public election process, but rather answered the call of her city and of her party in a time of great need. And so I know that we are all very thankful for her for doing that, and I think she'll do a fabulous job as a member of this council. So, with that, Christine, if you just raise your right hand, please, and repeat after me. I, Christine Nisley,
I, Christine Nisley,
do solemnly swear
that
I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of Athens City Councilperson at large, to which I have been appointed to fill an unexpired term ending December 31st, 2009. Christine, congratulations. Cheers, put it down. And I'll officially put the stamp on that, and we'll get that to you.
Member Nisley, we'll ask you to take your seat at the end of the row here. Welcome, you're now one of 7. On to our public hearing. The Planning Commission's recommendations to add sexually oriented business uses to the Athens City Zoning Code. Member Phillips, you'll run this public hearing?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Whenever council makes a change to the zoning code, we have a public hearing to give people an opportunity to speak to us and give input to us on the decisions that we're making. We've discussed this in committee. It's been through the Planning Commission, and their recommendation has come back to us. We are at third reading this evening, so at our regular session later on this evening, we will be voting on this ordinance. The ordinance establishes some limitations on the locations for any sexually oriented businesses. They would be required to be at least 1,000 feet away from any school, place of worship, residential neighborhood, or park. We would not be able to just straight out forbid them existing in the city because of constitutional law, but we can regulate the locations and the zones where such businesses can be located. So that's what this proposed ordinance would do. And at this time, if there's any member of the public who would like to speak to council about this issue, generally council rules allow that anyone can speak to us for 3 minutes. Is there any member of the public wishing to address us about this ordinance tonight? Seeing none, I'll hand this back to the President of Council, and we can move on.
Just to make sure that there is no one that has come tonight that wishes to speak to this issue in any way. Also seeing none, we will declare our public hearing complete. Our next item on our agenda is a Finance and Personnel Committee meeting, and that would be chaired by Member Sands.
Mr. President, we have a couple issues that I would like to introduce during this committee meeting that we didn't get to talk about last week, and it appears that both of these issues are going to be we're going to be asked to suspend the rules this evening, so I want to have an opportunity to talk about them. The first issue is appropriations and transfers as seen in Ordinance 04508. Essentially, This is an ordinance reauthorizing, reappropriating some funds that we moved around just a few weeks ago. We were asked to allocate some funds from various areas into the 600 level areas of the budget, because they were going to be used for refunds and various fees. As it turns out, the auditor's office is reminding us that when the state auditors were here, the state auditors asked that such funds be stored in the 300 level areas. And so we're being asked to basically undo what we did a couple weeks ago. The amounts that you see in this ordinance are the same amounts that were moved into the 600s, and now we're moving them back out into the various 300 level funds they came from. This is as far as I can understand, a bookkeeping issue. The money needs to be allocated to certain funds so that it can be utilized for different uses. The reason for suspending the rules on this particular ordinance is that the Internal Service Fund actually pays some payroll monies out of this 300 level fund, and so that there is a payroll coming up, so we need to suspend the rules. It's kind of confusing, but it's really pretty simple. It's just reversing what we did before to satisfy the state auditors. Anybody have any questions? Anybody understand enough to ask questions?
Jim, just to help you with this a little bit, I did receive a call this week, and I quizzed the person I talked to at length over why is this really happening, and at that point I did get a level of satisfaction over why it was happening. But boy, I'll tell you, when you look at the amounts, do these exactly match, and I know I'm blindsiding you with the amounts that was in the previous ordinance?
I think a couple of them are
I think so,
different.
yeah.
Oh, good, Kathy's here. I'm sorry, I didn't see you come in.
Sorry, I thought I had more time. The
Okay,
agenda.
yeah.
Yeah, we did. We just took those same amounts and reversed them back out.
So if I would read this ordinance and I would read the one of a couple of weeks ago, they are almost a mirror image. Okay. Can you explain it one more time? Because we've got some new council members, and I'm slightly bedazzled by this, and I've been around for a while, a long while.
Well, I know, and I understand that too. And I think that's why we've been trying to do this for 2 or 3 years now, since the state auditors asked us to do this. And I'm not sure why it really matters, but they don't want us to do the transfers, the automatic transfers. They want it to be shown as an expense, so it should be shown out of the 300s. The 600s are really for refunds and transfers, and true expenses come out of the 2 and 300s. It's just, it's really, to me, and I'm sure you're thinking 6 one way and half a dozen the other. It's really the same thing, just different lines.
And Kathy, if you could explain again to a few of the new council members, I'd appreciate it, a little bit of the accounting philosophy behind what the Internal Services Fund really is. And if you want me to help out with that, I can, but...
Well, sure. Internal Service Fund is one where the services are applied throughout the city. Not necessarily to every department or every department equally, But the 3 mechanics are paid out of that fund, vehicle mechanics, and several departments have vehicles, and they all go there. So rather than trying to, and I know at OU and other places they do this, that we could have each department then bill, themselves back to the city or however, but it's really just more paperwork to do it that way. So some of the things that basically are citywide are paid out of the internal service fund. I think part of one of the electricians is paid out of there, maybe all of it, forget offhand, but there are 4 people paid out of there. And so each department that, pretty much every department, every fund pays into this for services that they get. Some of the things Beverly does come out of there. I mean, rather than every department, or every fund having their own personnel person or billing, individually. Every time Beverly would do something, then she would have to bill that department to get the money back, or the mechanics. So instead of them tracking every time they change spark plugs or a tire or whatever, and then having to bill that department, we just have every department pay into that fund.
It's an accounting system that I remember was implemented during the Hendricker administration to try to make some of these things a little bit easier. So that's why we've got some people in there that are coming up for a payroll this week that we need to get it paid, and to move it back, we will pay it out of the correct thing. Jim, I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump all over you.
No, I appreciate you doing that. I just wanted to add, you commented on people who aren't familiar with our system. Council gets involved because the auditor can't transfer money between transaction classes. Council has to do that, but within those transaction levels, the auditor's office can move that money around. So we moved it once, we need to do it again. So.
And I guess the only other thing that I would say in defense of everybody that's trying to defend this action tonight is that accounting is an art. It is not a science. As long as you are recognizing expenses and revenues a certain way, that's fine. And when you get a new auditor, and believe me, I was treasurer for 4 years and saw several different auditors that wanted things done several different ways, and I think a couple of them went back to the original way that we used to do it, kind of stuff. You can fight it, and all you are going to do are get findings by the state auditor. None of us want those. So that, to a large extent, is what we're seeing tonight, and I know it's hard to understand and a little bit to swallow.
Right,
So,
and it's not anything different than what we've been doing for years. It's just, like you said, coming out of different transaction classes because the auditors asked us to. We're paying the same things that we have in the past, just out of a different transaction class.
yeah.
But yes, we thought we were supposed to be back in the 600s at the beginning of the year, and then we realized, I am on my second set of auditors since I came into office too, so. Haven't changed anything, haven't changed the amounts. And what we did, as you said about the payroll, is within the 200s and 300s, we had moved money to make these transfers for January and February, and now to do that, to cover our payroll, we need to move this money back up there. There's no money to move around, and we need to replace that money that we used from, other account lines.
A little more information and another explanation why this needs to be considered under suspension of the rules when it comes up. Mayor?
There was some discussion about having an orientation with the auditor sometime for council members. Is that on track?
I'm going to be announcing that in just a little bit, but
Okay.
it is April 19th, and
Okay, no problem.
yes.
Okay, the second...
I don't
sorry.
think that would have saved us what we just
Oh,
went
no.
through here.
Just, more,
The second item is a little more straightforward. As we all know, the city, with its health insurance, is a self-insured entity. But even as a self-insured entity, we are required by the state to follow certain rules. And one of those rules is that we hire a third-party administrator to actually deal with the claims. Nobody in the city actually makes rulings on those. And we have a contract with Pfizer Health, which is a new name for a company we've been dealing with. And the personnel director has recommended that we continue this contract with this organization. She's given us some costs. Currently, Pfizer is charging $17.75 per employee on an annual basis, and the rate if we went for a 3-year contract would lock it at $18.55. If we held it back for a 2-year rate, it would be a little bit less at $18.47, but at the end of 2 years, we'd be in a wild card position, and certainly the cost would go up. Councilmember Bain did have a question about, do we have a way to get out of this contract if, for some reason, things changed? And that can happen. There's an annual time, there's a time within each calendar year that we can cancel this contract. So if things changed within 3 years, we would not be stuck with this. But this contract expires on April 15th. And so we won't have another regular session before then. Another justification for suspension of the rules. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You know, it seems like every time that this comes up, and we always suspend, do we have contracts, or are we developing a tickler file for expiration dates of contracts by any chance?
I'm working on it.
Okay.
I do not have one together yet.
That was one thing I had recommended to the new administration when they came in, both that happen so that we don't keep doing this. And this is your first, so I'm not pointing a finger at this mayor over this, but this does seem to happen way too much. The other thing, when was this one last bid? This is the new one, isn't it? We had not bid it for quite a few years, is that correct?
I think we did it a year.
Yeah, we've done it.
So this is the new TPA
This is our
from
recommendation
when we did
from the
bid it
bidding
the first.
process, yeah.
Okay, that's what I wanted to, okay.
Could you clarify what $18.55 means? Is that per
Per employee.
transaction? Per employee, per transaction?
No,
No, it's just per employee.
$18.50? Then how much is the other part of it? I thought we were talking about roughly $2,000 worth of costs with respect to third-party administrators. I mean, this is the part where
That would
they're
be
checking
about
the
right.
rules. Remember when we went through the process of changing the personnel ordinance?
Right.
And so there's another part to this that we have with a different entity?
we've got the stop loss.
Yeah, well, yeah, stop loss, but remember how, it was close to $2,000 per. It'd be nice not to suspend, but here we are, right? My personal opinion is, go ahead and do it, and we can get out of it if we have to. I would, as I look at the current political scene, it seems to me that a small group of people being self-insured might have seemed good 20 years ago, but I look at what people are saying, and they're all talking about using insurance companies. And if we had even the prospect of single payer, I would have a different attitude, but I guess I'm more inclined to think that maybe we should look, instead of being by ourselves in the future, in the not-too-distant future, at what it would cost to have it bid by an insurance company. And with respect to the probable outcome of the next election and the rest of the things that
I agree.
I think
It's certainly time, it's past time probably to
way past
review
time.
this whole,
But now
this whole
with the-
idea.
Yeah, if we had a single payer, even probability, it would have been okay, but now that seems to be a ship that sailed, but to my chagrin, but here we are. So I will support you to suspend the rules on this, even though
Well,
Pfizer.
how about one more?
Oh, good.
You're pushing your limits.
And actually, I need to ask about this one because I was just told in the hallway that we do have another ordinance about renewing a note for the Columbus Road water project, a $200,000 note to be renewed. I don't see any dates in here, but I was told as I walked down the hall that we do need to suspend on that. That's ordinance 04508.
Right. That's that $200,000 that we borrowed a year ago for the Columbus Road project, and although the water fund is in pretty good shape, and we thought we would pay it off after 1 year, we transferred quite a bit of money out of the water fund into the sewer fund last year when we decided to split the red tag fees, if you recall, about $250,000, $248,000, I believe, something like that. And so at this point in the year, we don't have the money to pay that off. 6 months from now, towards the end of the year, they might be in a position to pay it off. But for the time being, we need to roll it over. And pay
And it is due
April 13th.
April 13th. And there's the
There's
suspension.
the rub.
I quit.
You have any miscellaneous?
Is 045
Other
then going to
miscellaneous?
be on, are we going to suspend the rules on this? Is that what you're saying?
We won't have another regular session before that.
Could we go over that then before we do the
Yes,
miscellaneous?
please.
Look at section 2, 5007.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to have people take a look at decreasing water fund administration by $250,000. $249, internal service transfers, that's probably roughly 10% of the fund amounts. Sewer fund, we're on page 2.
You're looking at
229,
45.
440.
This is the one she's talking
Yeah, the one we're going to suspend on today, 4508. I mean, the amount of money that we're sending a garbage fund by 1,815, and let's see. I mean, I've seen
There's
various
further ones in the
cases.
back page too, if you're
Yeah,
looking.
page 2.
Yes.
And then, let's go back, did we already put the recreation amount in there? Because I was, street fund,
148.
No, the recreation amount is in a separate ordinance. Do we have that one going yet?
No.
we did that
No,
already.
it's in that
Yeah,
ordinance.
yeah.
It's there.
It's
So
the very
that,
bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2.
No, it's on page 2. Do we have a page 2?
Recreation Fund middle, section 2, as opposed to community center.
Okay, so we did the community center, 92,000, and we increased it.
Recreation, 32,000. About 4 up from the bottom.
4 from the bottom on page 1,
Yes.
32,000 for
internal
internal service.
Yes.
And then the
You see, there's got to be some kind of intellectual basis for this eventually. I think we need to, by the end of the year,
There
look at this
used to
more
be,
carefully.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I have yet to find a rationale for it, but the original thing I hear is it's coming from the amount of vehicles that are being used, but I haven't seen that real
All the
track.
more reason to get rid of them.
Again, that hasn't tracked all the way, so I'm still looking at that.
we have, and I know how you feel about this, and we brought it up. I've talked to Paul about it and Ray, and I'm not opposed to changing how we handle these payments, but right now we have people getting paid out of that fund, and so
Oh,
that
no,
I
it's next
finally
year.
just, I waited. I've been waiting since January to see if we were going to do something. We haven't. We've borrowed money from other account lines. We need to move money back in there to pay those. But as I said, I'm not opposed to changing this. We can go back and change.
Probably not this year, probably more for
I
next.
think recreation and community center are some of those funds, in particular where the maintenance workers are paid here. So,
Out of internal service.
Right.
because they deal with several,
Yeah. I mean, there's some
Areas in the city.
decisions that were made that
Yeah.
weren't very
but.
legislative, not by the auditors.
Right. This is how it was done when I came into office, and I'm not saying that's the reason to not change anything, but as Paul said, we haven't quite figured out the formula for the amounts either. So, once we can get a handle on that, maybe make some recommendations. I'm not opposed to changing how we do this, but right now we need money in there for payroll. And as I said, we can always, if we make a change, make it retroactive and switch
Probably
things
not.
for the year, whatever you want to do. But right now, we need money in there to pay people.
Okay.
Jim?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, a couple of the miscellaneous, I think I discussed this with you a while back. The telephone system was going to need some extra money for Newcomb because we're putting an extra tower in by Curran, and the other extended tower, we're almost another $100,000 up in terms of cost. The other discussion, and I just bring these up because I don't want really, we'll bring it up at another committee meeting, I assume. The other thing is I plan to buy some software for the code to update their database system eventually. That's under the $25,000 limit, but I just want to make you aware that that's going to be something I want to purchase. And the third thing, I think Nancy, Ron Forrest discussed with you, is the leasing, trying to lease computers and generating a leasing program for all the city computers. Which will depend on how many computers we start with. Will be either under or over 25,000. I've yet to decide what computers to cut off on and replace in the first round. Just so you know.
The tower, we will talk about it at our next committee meeting.
I just want everybody to think about it and stew on it.
Are you done? We have got just a couple of minutes before our regular session of council starts, and I was going to do this during our regular session of council, but let's go ahead and do it now. I'd like to take a couple of moments to acknowledge the passing of Mayor Don Barrett, who died last Friday. I was very lucky to know Don Barrett. He was quite a man that the city is poor for no longer having. I called somebody today to ask about his service as mayor, and he served the city from 71, he was elected, to 83, I believe. And it was quite a turbulent time in this town. Those of us that lived here could tell you. And when I was talking to Mary Dials, who shared this story with me, I thought it'd be a nice story to share. You don't always know how somebody comes into politics, but this one I thought was very interesting. Ray Shepard had been the mayor of Athens for some time. He is here when I came here in '69, and he lost in the Republican primary by a man who was a business owner, owned a restaurant that was known to not serve blacks, would not employ a black, and won as mayor and had no Democratic opposition. And some of the citizens of Athens decided that was not how they wanted their city represented, and they approached Don Barrett and asked him if he would run for mayor. He ran as an independent and went door to door. Only in the last couple of weeks did the Democratic Party join his effort and offered him money and assistance, and I understand he won with a wide margin. That's how Don Barrett became the mayor of Athens, served for 12 years and was highly distinguished and very well liked. It was the first time in 35 years that the city had a Democratic mayor. So it was really a bellwether time when things really turned over, and when I look around this room and every member of this council is now a Democratic member, and both members of the administration, all three of them now are Democratic, I think we can probably trace our roots back to that time. When I first got elected to council, I was fortunate enough to get to have lunch with Don Barrett several times, and he was such a kind and generous man with his time. He shared with me some of his war stories and some of the things that he went through, and was always very kind and helpful to anyone in the city. It was tragic about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when his wife died in a terrible car wreck, and Don kind of slowly went down from there, but he passed this past Friday, and I'm sorry to see him go. Well, with that, it is on or about 7:30, and we do have a quorum. I call to order the regular session of City Council. And now we do have 7 members. Christine Nisley, we'd like to welcome you. Communications, I am in receipt of a liquor permit that is transferring from North Court Street LLC and patio to Wood Road Investments LLC, doing business as the Maplewood. So if anyone would like to object to that, call the clerk of council, give her something to do. Yeah, okay. Let's see. Also, Paul, you were asking about finance training for council members. Saturday, April 19th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the OUN. There will be finance review training for new members of council and any other members of council. And since this is a meeting of council, anyone in the public that would like to join us is welcome to join us. So again, Saturday, April 19th from 9 to 11 a.m. The auditor is going to be going over reports and how the flow of about $30 million in the city of Athens happens every year. One other item that I am in receipt of and have lost, we have now, the 60 days has expired. The clerk has presented council with the annexation of Beaumont Green. So we have received the zoning of R3 from the Planning Commission. So Debbie will send that on to your way for the Planning and Development Committee to deal with. Are there any other communications that anyone? Yes, Member Butler.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to remind everyone that we did receive an email, council, regarding some concerns with the city website from a concerned member of the community. So it has been addressed, and we were able to talk this weekend with that person as well on the city tour, street tour.
I kind of wish that that email had been handled a little bit more tactfully, because sometimes people don't know what they are talking about. I'm not going to take the time to really share it with everybody. I will see, but I had Ron Forrest share with me exactly where we are with the software and the financing of what we are looking at doing to bring that up to date. That has not been the highest priority lately, although I would submit that having the Planning Commission's new members on it should have been done. But if we could make copies of this for all members of council and share it with them, please be advised that there is a lot going on in that regard.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other communications? Reports and communications from other elected officials. Let's start with Law Director Lang this time.
Nothing for you tonight, Mr. President.
We appreciate it. News from you generally costs lots of money. Okay. Mayor Weil.
In terms of the website, I asked Ron also how often, there is on the front page a broken links report form. I asked him how often it was done, and he says never. So there is a feedback mechanism in place. Actually wondered if it works, so I sent him 2 emails to test it with various updated versions of what need to be fixed on the website. And I know one of the issues at that point is how much the information gets to him from the administration. I'll try working on that. I have several things. One is spring cleanup is coming, and I bring this up, it's the last week of this month, April 28th to May 2nd. There's flyers. I think you all got one in your mailbox. There's extra flyers down at the utilities office. I bring it up because I got an email from somebody saying, when is it? And again, it usually is the last week in April, where you can add as many things as you want in barrels, in bags, I mean. I also passed along a letter from AEP concerning tree trimming that's coming up, sent me from Steve Stanley. His phone number is 740-594-1960. This has to do with the tree trimming that Aspen does every year. If you go around, you'll see some blue dots and some pink dots, and They will try getting in touch with the various owners, but I gave it to you because I'm sure there'll be some concerns one way or the other, or information, or rather criticism of it. Just to let you know that there was a contract walkthrough for the 6th story of the garage. Verizon is starting to put their tower up. They'll be doing it sometime in the next few months. This is a contract that was put together sometime almost a year ago that was never acted on, just so you know. We'll be tying up about 7 parking spaces. You really have very little to do with it, but if you see suspicious people with cranes and stuff like that, be aware of it. To let you aware of there was a slip on Pomeroy Road we're working on. It's mostly mud going into the street, but it has to be dealt with eventually. And the last item I have is a release from Captain Pyle. He's noted that there's a lot of break-ins that have been occurring, burglaries. He says, lock your doors, please, and your cars. This is an issue, I guess. And that's really all I have right now.
Do you expect the slip to be expensive?
That's a good question. I think it's an ongoing problem. This is about the 3rd time they've had to go in there and do something. The email I got from Ron Lucas is that they put a culvert in to try make sure the water flows properly, but a lot of it has to do with the land above it, and actually technically that's actually outside the city limits. So I don't know. I think every time we have to fix it, we're just carving out more of the hill there.
Yeah.
And that, unless we can, I think the concept is to talk to the property owner and try working something out at this point. I'm aware of at least 3 times we've had to go up there in the past 2 or 3 weeks.
I know it happened fairly suddenly this weekend and caused a lot of people to call me.
Okay.
So,
I'll forward you that email that Ron, but that's still a work in progress. I mean, they just give him a report from today, and it's, the next rain will do something different.
Questions for the mayor? City Auditor Kathy Hecht.
No report.
No report. Okay. On to ordinances for 3rd reading. O-2408, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit a fiscal year 2008 Community Housing Improvement Program's CHIP grant application to the Office of Housing and Community Partnerships, Ohio Department of Development, and designating Hocking, Athens, Perry Community Action Agency as a Community Housing Improvement Program grant contract administrator and declaring an emergency. Member Sands.
Mr. President, I move adoption of ordinance 2408.
Second.
As you recall, at a recent committee meeting, we had Mr. Stanley come talk to us from Tri-County Community Action, that the state has changed the requirements for CHIP grants significantly since the last time we applied, and he was not even sure that he would recommend that the city apply for this. This ordinance is not authorizing an application. It's simply authorizing the mayor to submit an application if he and the administration decides that it is something we should go after at this point.
So motion and second. Further discussion?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was an update on that from your office.
We had the Housing Advisory Committee just met for the 2nd time. One of the requirements is that there are 2 meetings with various stakeholders. I think we had about a little bit over a half dozen of the members here from various organizations. Part of this meeting was actually to put various strategies and priorities to what we want to do. Again, part of the mix of that's changed is designating a target area, which is not really required. And we recommend not doing it after the discussion, at least from the city. It was both the city-county mix on this, because if you target an area, you pretty much have to spend money in that area. And the idea there is that we have, according to calculation, in terms of home ownership, for instance, we only have probably about 300 to 400 low and middle income housing that are home owner occupied. Some of the other strategies there is a laundry list of strategies that can be dealt with. The conclusion was that at this point we'd probably cycle through the same as we did last time, which is home repair, rehabilitation, then homeowner assistance or down payment assistance. Some of the other issues that I brought up is eventually trying to work with Habitat for Humanity's It's part of the package that can go there as we assist in them in either demolition or acquisition of lots, demolition of old housing, but it requires a massive communication between the various entities, not only acquiring a lot, but finding a place and then going through the whole roll of it. That would probably be up for another year or two. We're probably not putting any matching money in. Both the lack of target area and the lack of match will probably lower our priority rating, so to speak, but we'll give it a shot anyway at this point. So we're not committing ourselves to extra funds. That was the conclusion of it. If you want, if I get a report from Doug of the entire meeting, I'll let you know. I'll send it to you.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Other comments? All those in favor of the ordinance?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 2808, an ordinance closing portions of Court Street and Washington Street on Friday, June 20th, July 18th, and August 15th for a cruise-in. Member Butler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Briefly, I'd just like to move to adopt O2808.
Second.
Thank you. Quite simply, to continue with the annual fare for the cruise-in as stated on the date of August 15th, July 18th, and June 20th. Thanks.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the ordinance?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 3008, an ordinance closing a portion of Court Street, West State Street, Congress Street, I'm getting mush mouth, West Washington Street, and West Union Street on Sunday, June 1, 2008, between the hours of 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. for the first annual Athens Great Bicycle Race and Family Fun Cycling Challenge. Member Butler.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe at this moment, having received some more information regarding this issue, I'd like to table it.
Second.
Thank you. We received an email from Gina Jeremiah and the Athens County Convention and Visitors Bureau, and at this moment they're respectfully wanting to withdraw their request to block the streets for that particular race. I think it might behoove us to gain a little bit more information, perhaps give Tim Tyler an opportunity to meet with us or to present his case, since we haven't heard from him directly. So if you think he has interest in a race, it might help for him to share with us so we can gain some more information.
Motion and second to table ordinance 3008. Is there further discussion on tabling the ordinance? All those in favor of tabling ordinance 3008?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been tabled. Ordinance 3308, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to purchase one unmarked police vehicle. Member Kuhn.
Mr. President, Captain Pyle has informed me that the police department is withdrawing their request to purchase an open bed vehicle for their unmarked vehicle. And they are requesting instead a Chevrolet Malibu hybrid. The cost of that is a little more, so I move to amend ordinance 03308.
Second.
Motion and second to amend ordinance 3308. Discussion on the amendment only. Do you have the amendment written as you wish to have it?
I don't really have it written as I wish to have it, but I am moving to amend sections 2 and 3. Section 2 would increase the appropriation to $21,213, and Section 3 would increase the authorization to expend to $21,213.
Okay. Motion and second. Further discussion.
Yeah,
Member
I'm
Gosney.
really excited that the police department is wanting to move towards more efficient vehicles, and unfortunately I think this is kind of micromanaging, which I don't want to do, but I think if we amend this to purchase a Chevy Malibu, it would be a poor vehicle choice because it gets practically the same gas mileage as a regular Malibu, just has a hybrid tag on it. I'm willing to gather more information and present that to Captain Pyle, and perhaps they would find another vehicle that they think would be suitable. But I'm afraid that if we just amend this and then keep it going on readings, we're going to have a poor choice presented to council.
We have 3 readings, right? This will be
Right.
first reading, so
Right.
you'll have time to do your thing. If we vote for this.
Is there further discussion on the amendment only? Mayor Weil.
Remember, really what this is discussing is the purchase of an unmarked vehicle. The price is being dictated by the Malibu hybrid Chevrolet. It doesn't mean that if there's some other choice that comes through after the reading, they can't be convinced of something different. We point out they are trying to compromise on this level by putting a hybrid in. I know there's a whole spectrum of hybrids that are gas guzzles just the same, but they're attempting to actually to listen to council and to modify their inventory. Again, I don't know to say let's recommend something different. You could spend a lot of time trying to find out the best deal at this point. I'd like to see a hybrid at least in fleet somewhere to start with. I mean, this may be a poor one, but it's a start. And if you come up with something after the reading and you can convince them, that's another matter entirely. I mean,
Let's keep this on
Okay.
the amendment only,
Okay.
you know. Is there further discussion on the amendment as read? All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance 3308 has been amended and read for the first time. Is there further discussion anyone would like to have on it now? Okay. Ordinance 3408, an ordinance establishing the allocation of sewer service charges to the Sewer Debt Fund, 758, limiting operating budgets in order to reduce short-term debt, amending the 2007 appropriation ordinance retroactively to January 108, and declaring an emergency. And this is introduced by all members of council. Member Bain, this kind of looks like you.
Mr. President, I move adoption of Bill 3408.
Second.
3408 is the result of work by various people. I'll spare you the law fest and just go on and say that what we're trying to do is maybe align expenditures more in keeping with our revenue, specifically making sure that we have funds in the budget to cover our debts early and actually limiting the operating budget at this point in time and trying to pay off some of that loan, those debts we've been carrying for a couple of years at the same time. So we're meeting our long-term and our short-term debts. Yes.
Okay. So we'll have a second.
Yeah, I did move
Motion and a second for adoption of ordinance 3408. Is there further discussion on the ordinance?
Bill?
Member Weil.
Mayor
Mayor Weil. We think you'll always be a member to us.
Why, thank you.
At least to me, obviously. Yeah, I'm senile.
I'd like to thank you for your work on this and your input on this. And again, this, to my mind, is part of what I want to see coming out of council in terms of a shared governance, to use somebody else's phrase. But actually, the idea we're both involved in the budget and and how things get done. So thank you for putting this together.
Other
Thanks.
comments?
As you as well. Kathy,
Well, actually, Ray
Ray.
Hazlett put this together.
Yes, I know. Well, the idea is to take the time and do this.
He did.
Yes.
Further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 3408?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 3508, an ordinance amending the Athens City zoning code to include zoning regulations for the establishment of sexually oriented businesses within the city of Athens. Again, introduced by all members of council. And when it comes to sexually oriented businesses, we thank Debbie Phillips. So,
Gee, thanks, Bill. I move adoption of 03508.
Second.
As you know, a recent proposal for such a business that's very close to my ward raised quite a lot of citizen comment and concern, and many folks who live in my ward did communicate with me. I received a number of phone calls and emails from people who were very concerned about the possible negative impacts on the businesses in the neighborhood, on our ability to implement the comprehensive plan, on the residential neighborhood nearby, and on the elementary school nearby. While we can't pass an ordinance that would retroactively affect an application that had been made, it did raise that question for all of us on council to really look at what we can do. And so I wanted to read just two of the whereases from the ordinances to be really clear about our goals in this, because there are some limits on what we can do as a council. But one of them, whereas this city council desires to minimize and control the adverse effects and thereby protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizenry, protect the citizens from increased crime, preserve the quality of life, preserve the property values and character of surrounding neighborhoods, and deter the spread of urban blight. And whereas the intent is not to suppress any speech activities protected by the First Amendment, but to enact a content-neutral ordinance which addresses the secondary effects of sexually oriented businesses. So just to be clear, it is well within our rights to regulate the secondary effects of these kinds of businesses, and it's well within our rights to look at the zoning and the effects on different kinds of neighborhoods. So that's what this ordinance puts in place. There are limits on where a business like this could be located. It will not be allowed to be within 1,000 feet of any building which is primarily used for religious worship, public or private school, the boundary of any residential zoning district, a public park, a public library, or any other sexually oriented business. So it really just puts those limits in place about where something like this could be located, and it is modeled on the ordinance that exists in Worcester, Ohio, which has stood up to a court challenge. So I think we have some good precedent that communities in Ohio can protect themselves from these type of businesses that could have a negative impact in our neighborhoods.
Further discussion on ordinance 3508.
Mr. President?
Yes, Member Butler.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, too, that far away from the east side, on the west side, I received much support as well for this, that I was confronted by a number of community members who were opposed to a business that was slated or introduced to the east side. So conversely, I didn't receive any support for wanting a gentleman's club or a facility like that. So I think this is a step in the right direction.
Other comments? Anyone from the audience? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 3508?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 3608, an ordinance granting a revocable license to the Hartley Company, allowing the installation of monitoring wells on the roadways of May Avenue, East State Street, Tulane Road, and an unnamed alley to the south of East State Street. Member Phillips.
Mr. President, I move adoption of O3608.
Second.
This is a renewal of an existing revocable license. These monitoring wells are there to monitor for ongoing environmental assessment around the former Athens Shell Station.
Other
And we
comment?
have, for anybody who's new, our revocable licenses have to be renewed every 10 years. So this is just coming back to us. It's fairly standard.
Any other comments? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 3608?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 3708, an ordinance granting a revocable license to Glenn Knutson, owner 215 Columbus Road, for the use of the city right-of-way for a sign. Member Phillips.
Mr. President, I move adoption of O3708.
Second.
This is another renewal of a revocable license for an existing sign that is in the public right-of-way.
Other comments? All those in favor of adoption of the ordinance?
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance 3708 is adopted. Ordinance 3808, an ordinance granting a revocable license to James E. Moss, North Moss Restaurants, LLC, doing business as WG Grinders, 120 West Union Street, for the use of the city right-of-way. Again, Member Phillips.
Mr. President, I move adoption of O3808.
Second.
This is another renewal of a 10-year revocable license for use of our public right-of-way. And I will note that there have been some comments as we've gone through the readings about some drawings that were attached to the original approval of the revocable license for some landscaping. And I think we will pass this along to the Tree Commission because there's been some interest expressed in seeing if the landscaping might be able to happen.
Thank you.
Other comments? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 3808?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance is adopted. On to ordinances for second reading. Ordinance 2908, an ordinance closing a portion of Court Street between Washington and State Streets from 8 a.m. on Saturday, July 19th, 08 to 1 a.m. on Sunday, July 20th, 08 for a family music festival, Boogie on the Bricks, suspending the enforcement of Athens City Code Title 13, Section 13.04.10, unnecessary noise, and Title 7, Section 7.05.26B1, city garage metered parking rates and regulations. Member Butler.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess just briefly for second reading, not a whole lot to add.
I guess not. I don't know why I threw it to you. It's a little joke I like to play on new council members.
Do you like my voice?
Yeah, I'm really getting used to
I'm
it.
enjoying the airtime.
New members don't get a lot of that. I apologize. Ordinances for first reading. We only have one for second. Ordinance 4308, an ordinance providing for the issuance of $275,000 worth of water system revenue notes, 11th 2008 renewal by the City of Athens, renewing notes previously issued for the purpose and declaring an emergency. Member Sands.
Mr. President, this ordinance, the title of this ordinance explains in very short language, where we have 5 pages of fine print in our packet of ordinances. It simply allows the city to renew $275,000 worth of notes for the purpose of continuing payment for some problems on the West State Street area. West State Street welfare. Auditor?
I was just going to add one thing. As you probably remember when we discussed this ordinance, there are no amounts in there for the interest rate. Usually we would have that, but because of how things are changing, when I called the bank, they asked that I wait till closer till the end of April. But we will make sure that's in there before third reading.
Other comments? Ordinance 4408, an ordinance authorizing the auditor to renew the $200,000 note for water project funds required to meet city obligations in the water fund and declaring an emergency. Member Sands.
Mr. President, at this time I ask that we consider ordinance 4408 under suspension of the rules.
Second?
We talked about this in our special committee meeting that we had before. This is a note of $200,000 that we borrowed from Hocking Valley Bank to pay for work that is done along Columbus Road with regards to our water lines there. And this note is due April 13th before our next regular scheduled meeting, and we need to authorize the auditor to renew this note, roll it over, as they say.
Further discussion on suspension of the rules only. All those in favor of suspending the rules on ordinance 4408?
Aye.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
Mr. President, I move adoption of ordinance 4408
Second.
for the reasons we've already discussed.
Further discussion. All those in favor of adoption of the ordinance?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 4508, an ordinance amending the 2008 appropriation ordinance. Member Sands.
Mr. President, I ask that we consider ordinance 4508 under suspension of the rules. Again, we talked about this at length during committee meeting. It is confusing, but it's an artistic financial endeavor, as the President of Council pointed out.
Artistic. All the, further discussion on suspension only. All those in favor of suspending the rules on ordinance 4508?
Aye.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
Mr. President, I move adoption of ordinance 4508.
Second.
Actually, this is an ordinance that reverses an ordinance that we passed several weeks ago. Upon review, the auditor's office realized that their state auditors who oversee their office actually is requiring them to have these funds in transaction classes 300 rather than 600 where they would normally have page one. So we're moving them back to keep the higher echelon of auditors satisfied.
Is there further discussion on ordinance 4508? All those in favor of adoption of the ordinance?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 4608, an ordinance authorizing a contract extension of the city's third-party health insurance administrator and declaring an emergency. Again, Member Sands.
Mr. President, I ask that we consider ordinance 4608 under suspension of the rules.
Second.
This is
Stretching your limit, obviously.
This is a request from our Director of Personnel to extend a contract with Fiserv Health, who acts as our third-party administrator in our self-insurance pool with regards to health insurance. The current contract expires on April 15th.
I'm sorry, I was kibitzing with clerk. Let's see, where are we? Is there further discussion on suspension only? All those in favor of suspension for ordinance 4608?
Aye.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
Mr. President, I move adoption of ordinance 4608.
Second.
This ordinance, again, the Personnel Director has advertised for bids from various companies who deal with administering self-insured insurance funds, and she's recommending that we stay with the company that we have been with for the last 3 years. Their bid seems to be the least expensive. She's recommending that we take advantage of a 3-year contract. It has been pointed out that if situations change within that 3 years, there are opportunities for us to get out of this contract.
Further discussion on ordinance 46. All those in favor of adoption of the ordinance?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. On to one reading resolutions. Resolution 0308, a resolution requesting the Athens City Planning Commission consider amending the zoning code regarding outside business operations near residential zones within the city of Athens. This is introduced by all members of council. Who wishes to speak to it? Member Bain. I thought it had your fingerprints on it.
It's the third one. Mr. President, move adoption of R0308.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Couldn't second my own this time. This came out of our meeting on the 24th of March, wherein Patrick Lane, our law director, answered our question about the citizens' request for relief from the noise problems on the north side of town. Specifically, he said that 8407 apparently covered the noise problem with respect to the noise ordinance, and it's my understanding the mayor has asked his administration to deal with that. The second thing was, and I asked Patrick to do this, to put some language in that would accomplish what we think might be ambiguous already in the code, which may have been eliminated wrongfully in the last adjustment of the code. But what we're asking is a limit, 200 feet residential zone, operations ceasing that would boister up the noise ordinance amendment that we made. And Councilmember Phillips has reminded me that the Planning Commission is already engaged in a discussion of what exactly happened the last time we amended the zoning code in the strikeout version. So I suspect this may be redundant, but I'd like you to help the Third Ward solve its noise problem and ask them to continue this or maybe speed it up.
Member Phillips.
The other issue that had been raised about this section of the zoning code, in an amendment to the code that was made before I came on council, I think in the session of council just prior to that, there was significant reorganizing of the subdivisions and the zoning code. And when I looked at this, the question came up in relation to a question about could there be a Tim Hortons on Stimson Avenue, right? And it's not quite 200 feet from a residential zone. The old version of the code had that 200-foot limitation for drive-throughs, roadhouses, and summer gardens. Now, we're not exactly sure what roadhouses are, and there wasn't a definition in there that said what they were. But
I'm not sure what a summer garden is.
I think maybe it's a beer garden, is my guess. So, but again, there wasn't a definition in there. So the question generally has been raised with the Planning Commission about whether the intention really was to ban all restaurants within 200 feet, or maybe just the kind that have drive-throughs and outdoor operations. So that kind of larger question, I think, is already under discussion.
And we also talked about no building customarily used for night operations shall have any opening other than stationary windows was also part of that old one. So the Community Issues Committee, which you have in your mailbox, will summarize it for you. I hope you'll support me on this one.
Motion and second to adopt a one-reading resolution. Further discussion.
Pardon my naivety.
Member Butler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pardon my naivety, but can you please remind those of us newer on council about the one-reading resolutions, just the
As
protocol
opposed to
here?
a three-reading resolution? I'm going to...
That's the clerk.
Thanks, Butler.
Turnabout is fair play.
Doesn't require action from council. Okay. I guess that's it. I don't understand that. What do you mean it doesn't? We're requesting, so it has no effective law.
Okay.
Where an ordinance has the effective law,
The three-reading one does.
a three-reading one does. Okay.
Once again, I'd like to thank Patrick for his help on this.
Okay.
Doing my job.
Okay. You will for it, aren't you? Other comments? All those in favor of adoption of Resolution 0308?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution has been adopted. Resolution 0408, a resolution requesting the Athens City Police Department allow a 2-hour grace period for towing vehicles displaying a disability parking identification permit. Again, introduced by all members of council. Who would speak to this? Member Sands.
I will speak to this. This is a resolution supporting a request by the Disabilities Commission that was forwarded to the Athens City Police Department to allow some extra time before towing a vehicle which displayed a handicap sticker. And the Captain Pyle from the police department passed this on to Chief Mayor. They both said that this could be put into resolution of their actions with regard to each officer. And in fact, it's very close to what they do already. So again, the council is asking the police department to include this in their resolutions regarding activities.
Further discussion on Resolution 04. Member Bain.
And so this does not speak at all to the question of a parking ticket. It only refers to the tow.
The second whereas, third whereas.
I just want to make sure it was clear to the people out there in
Yes.
TV land.
And also, before we leave it, be it resolved by the council of the city of Athens that in section 1 these disability parking identification permits shall allow a 2-hour grace period before towing, except where public safety is threatened. So, as with all vehicles, if a vehicle is parked in some situation that would compromise public safety, this 2-hour limit would not go into effect, would not be effective. I'm sorry.
Member Bain.
I just want to say the grace period, not the ticket elimination, will mean that somebody else who has an appropriate sticker may not be able to park. I mean, it's a zero-sum game, isn't it? It's one of the problems with this, that if the spaces are taken, then the spaces are taken. Pointing out the obvious.
A big pun.
Yeah.
Have I not moved to?
Yes, you did. Didn't you second? Oh,
They don't think so. So, Mr. President, I move adoption of Resolution 0408.
Second.
And you
For all the
pretty
reasons
good
we
at-
just talked
Yeah, for Mayor Weil.
So it's ready to be adopted? Okay.
Well, we
As
should
you
have done
stated-
that at the beginning, but hey.
As you stated, this is essentially very close to what the police department does already. Realizing, of course, it does not only, if you have a handicap tag and you're outside the handicap parking, you'd also get that grace period. The assumption is that they'll see a handicap license plate or tag and not tow you at that point. One of the thrusts of this is also to relay our, it's more of a policy, is to relay our policy to the other entities, OU, as well as some of the private towing lots, with the idea that this is another issue as well. Getting ticketed is one thing, but getting your car, vehicle, or van towed while you can't get around after is another. But again, it will not, as you see from the third whereas, it will not prevent you from getting ticketed or fined.
Is there further discussion on Resolution 04? All those in favor of adoption of the resolution?
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution has been adopted. On to announcements and other business. Committee meetings for next time, yes.
I'll need planning and development next time for, what did you just tell me
One
about?
of the
Beaumont
things I
Green.
threw your way tonight.
And there's something
Yeah.
Steve wants us to talk about, I have an email about, that's been in my inbox, I don't have it printed out, so I'll have a couple miscellaneous.
Okay. And also for anyone that is not familiar with what committees Christine Knisley is on, it's the same ones that Amy had, so, yes,
And I would like to request a transportation committee meeting for next week.
very good. Any other committees?
Safety,
Safety?
vehicles.
Mr. President?
Yes, Member
I
Sands.
think we would like to have a meeting of the, what is it called? Community
Community.
Issues Committee, under which I may have a miscellaneous finance issue.
Okay. Okay. Kind of cryptic over there, but okay. Anything else? Now to an opportunity for citizens to speak on any legislative items or city services that was not covered on tonight's agenda. Seeing no one and having addressed all items on our agenda, we are adjourned.